We are now live on YouTube to the public. So I will now commence a full roll call of members in alphabetical order in order to check that each is present, and then we will start the meeting proper. So I will call out the name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate if you're present to the meeting? Councillor Abbas. Councillor Abbas. Councillor Abraham.
Present.
Councillor Archer. Councillor Archer.
Present. Sorry, present.
Councillor Aurora.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Bass.
Yes, present.
Councillor Bayman.
Present.
Councillor Fiona Bolt. Councillor Olivia Bolt.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Cobbett.
Present.
Councillor Cunningham.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, would you like to unmute Councillor Davis? I think we can see in the meeting that Councillor Davis is present in the meeting. Councillor Dunstone.
She's also present, you can see.
Councillor Dunstone. Councillor Dunstone. Would you like to unmute Councillor Dunstone and just confirm you're present?
Present, apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Durant.
Present.
Councillor Edwards.
Present.
Councillor Folder Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Fran.
Present.
Councillor Gander.
Present.
Councillor George.
Present.
Councillor Bishop. Councillor Bishop. Councillor Green. Councillor Green. Would you like to unmute Councillor Green? Councillor Green, could you confirm you're present?
Yes. Right, it wouldn't let me unmute. I think it has now. I am present.
Councillor Hart.
Yes, it's here.
Present.
Councillor Heath. Councillor Heath. Councillor Holt.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Kerr.
Present.
Councillor Kirsch.
Present.
Councillor Lidbetter.
Present.
Councillor Moll.
Present.
Councillor Netley.
Present.
Councillor Ravalia.
Present.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
Present.
Councillor Schaefer. Councillor Schaefer.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Hutchcroft-Sumner.
Present.
Councillor Sweeney.
Present.
Councillor Tyala.
It's here.
Councillor Tyala.
Hi. He's unmuted.
Okay, Councillor Tyala is present in the meeting.
Present.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Tolley.
Right here.
Councillor Waring.
Present.
Councillor White.
Present.
Councillor Wilkie. Councillor Wilkie. Councillor Self, apologies, I believe I missed Councillor Self and Councillor Shepherd. So Councillor Self. Councillor Self present.
Present. I've had to change my...
Councillor Shepherd.
Present.
Councillor Yoganathan.
Present.
And finally, Councillor Young.
Yes, present.
Madam Mayor, that now completes the roll call and you may start.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Gary. I am present. Thank you. Councillor Self, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor South.
And Councillor Goodchip has now joined the meeting. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, colleagues, officers, welcome to this. This is the first meeting of this council to ever be held virtually. Welcome to the members of the public who are viewing this meeting live on the council's YouTube channel, and a recording of the meeting will also be available to play back shortly after the meeting. While we have already held smaller committee meetings virtually, this is the first time that all 48 members of council have met in this way. So I hope you will therefore bear with us if some procedures, for instance voting, take a little longer than they should or they would in a physical meeting, or if any technical problems arise. At this point, I would like to thank both Democratic Service and IT officers for their care in trying to make sure that no problems do arise. In addition to the councillors, I'm joined in this meeting by Gary Marston, the Head of Democratic and Electoral Services, who you will have already heard on the roll call. Mr. Marston is physically present with me in the room, but we are observing social distancing at all times. Members of his team will be assisting with the running of the meeting, including the timing of members' speeches and other officers who are observing proceedings. If it is necessary for me to seek advice from an officer during the course of the meeting, we may need to call for a short adjournment. The meeting will also be adjourned if the public live stream fails at any point, because we do want to be sure that members of the public can observe the proceedings all the time. To help reduce feedback, can I ask all councillors to mute their microphones when they are not speaking? This does make a significant difference to the amount of feedback that other people hear. Also, please could you ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode for the duration of this meeting. Procedures have been circulated to assist councillors to participate during the meeting and to conduct the business of the meeting as smoothly as possible. The agenda is available to view on the council's website by following the links to Your Council, Democracy and Elections, and Decision Making and Committed. Thank you, Mr. Marston. I would at this point like to say that Councillor Bamford's father-in-law has had a serious fall and is very unwell indeed, and I'm sure we all wish him the very best for a speedy recovery. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does any member of council have a personal or pecuniary interest to declare? If you do, could you please type your name in the chat function and I will then call you to speak, and there will be a short pause of a few seconds to allow members to do that if they need to.
Madam Mayor, no councillor has indicated that they need to declare an interest.
Thank you. So no councillor has indicated that they have an interest, so we will move on to item 3, the minutes. Item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the council's last meeting on February the 27th, 2020. If any member has an objection to agreeing these as an accurate record of that meeting, please could you now indicate by typing your name into the chat function. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, no councillor has indicated an objection to agreement of the minutes.
Thank you. No objections, so we will record the minutes as agreed, and I will sign those minutes later when it is possible to do so. Item 4 is the Mayor's announcements, and I have the following announcements. Firstly, the Reverend Peter Holmes. It was with great sorrow that we learned of the death on the 25th of April of the Reverend Peter Holmes after a very long COVID-related illness. Peter has been the vicar of St Peter's Church, Norbiton, for the past 27 years and was due to retire later this year. He sadly died in hospital intensive care unit after suffering over several weeks with COVID-19. Among many tributes to Reverend Holmes, who founded the Joel Community Shelter for the Homeless, Kingston Churches for Action Against Homelessness, has said, Peter devoted his life to God's work and was a passionately committed voice for the most vulnerable in our community, particularly those experiencing homelessness. Peter was an influencer and a true champion of kindness and caring. We are so sad that he has gone, but we know that he is now in a wonderful place. Kingston Race and Equalities Council has said, Peter Holmes gave to those who needed from him. His contribution to Kingston with his passing will be a great loss to all who knew him. Peter's last words to his family were love each other, love God, run for Jesus. Whichever way this goes, I love you all. His son, Tom, has said of his father that he did not fear death because he knows where he's going. Councillor Kerr and I attended the funeral, and it was indeed a very moving occasion and a fitting tribute to a good man. Our thoughts with Peter's family at this time, and we also want to remember the families of all those in the borough who have lost a loved one during this pandemic or who have been unwell. The second Mayor's announcement is a happier occasion. This month marks the 30th anniversary since Councillor David Cunningham was elected to the council. 30 years. I reckon that makes 8 elections that David has fought, and that is an awful lot of doors that he's knocked on. He served the borough as mayor in 1998 to 9. He served as a cabinet member on 6 occasions. He's been a respected ward member for Tudor Ward, having stood in 8 local authority elections, as I said. He served on a very wide range of the council's committees and panels. There are too many to mention, but I would like to highlight his services as chair of the Growth Committee, chair of the Royal Park Neighbourhood Committee, and chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Overview Panel. And as a very long-standing member of the Development Control Committee and Kingston Town Neighbourhood Committee. He has also represented this borough on various external committees, again too many to mention, but they include the Local Government Association Urban Commission and the LGA General Assembly, the London Council's Associated Joint Committee and the London Council's Transport and Environment Committee, the South London Joint Waste Committee, and the Thames Landscape Strategy and the Kingston University Liaison Committee. I'm sure you would all like to join with me in congratulating Councillor Cunningham on this fine achievement, and we thank him for his many years of service on this council, and we will hope to mark it slightly better, I suppose, when we are able to meet in person as opposed to virtually. So David, thank you. There is one other announcement. Ms. Jean Cousins has served this council for 17 years of committed service. And I think we should all thank her for her hard work, her legendary attention to detail, the fact that she knows the answer to pretty much every question and she has a solution to every problem. Jean has been very helpful to me personally indeed over my 10 years on the council, and I am sure that you would all like to join me in wishing her a long and happy retirement. Jean, thank you very much indeed from all of us. Thank you. That concludes the Mayor's announcements. We will now move to item 5, decision-making arrangements during the COVID-19 appendix, and you will find those papers in Appendix A of your agenda papers. I would draw your attention to the late material circulated to all members this afternoon, which corrects Councillor Falchikoff's summary's description in Annex 3 and sets out a proposed amendment from the Conservative Group. And I would like to thank the Conservative Group for making the amendment available to all members before the start of this meeting, which has made it much easier to manage. So thank you. Councillor Kerr, will you move the recommendation on page A1 of the report? Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kirsch, will you be the seconder for those recommendations? And if so, do you wish to reserve your reply until later?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I second the motion, and I reserve my right to speak later, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kirsch. I have received requests in advance to speak from Councillors Davis, Cobbett, Sweeney, Fouchkoff-Sumner, Davey and White to speak on this item. If there are... I'm sorry, could we pause a moment? In turn, starting with Councillor Kerr, and Mr Nichols will start the timer and will remind members when they have 1 minute left to speak. Thank you. You have 4 minutes as per usual. Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
This is my first full council as leader, and before I address the motion, I'd like to thank my predecessor for her fine work, both as leader of the Liberal Democrat group and as leader of this council. She can boast fine achievements in both capacities, winning a historic victory in 2018 and doing so much to push through our key manifesto commitments in the first half of this term. I took over as leader at an unusual time when face-to-face meetings had just been cancelled in the interests of public safety. What we're proposing this evening means that decision-making by councillors in committee can now be resumed, clearly something that's essential for transparency and for democratic accountability. Since mid-March, when social distancing rules meant that committee meetings couldn't occur, urgency mechanisms have meant, within the Constitution, have meant that senior officers were able to take urgent decisions which would otherwise have needed approval in committees. The legislation which now allows us to hold this meeting will also allow us to establish virtual committee meetings. The structure we're proposing is a compromise, but we are living through extraordinary times and may be for some time to come. To return to the usual committee structure would have been unsustainable as a burden on our officers. We don't want to do that. Don't forget, a virtual committee meeting requires 3 times as much support from democratic services, as well as 2 IT staff. This is at a time when many members of staff are being redeployed into public health, and we cannot divert officers from frontline duties. The new Response and Recovery Committee will allow members to evaluate the Council's response to the crisis so far, but it will also look ahead to the challenging times that we face. As we review this Council's performance, I'd welcome the opportunity for the opposition to challenge the way things are done, if there's justification for that. For myself, I want to pay tribute to officers who have strained every sinew to support our residents in these very difficult days. I think that we can be proud of what this council has achieved. We've housed our rough sleepers, ensuring that they have medical support and freshly prepared meals, and now we are actively supporting them to help those with complex lives rebuild their lives after this crisis. We have set up Kingston Stronger Together, our volunteer hub, which has attracted 1,200 people. With the help of our fantastic public-spirited community, we have been delivering 10,000 frozen meals, 1,866 food parcels, countless prescriptions to those who are in need. We've also matched up more than 140 people who are struggling in isolation with buddies who are regularly supporting them. We've also done what we can for our business community, keeping them constantly updated with ever-changing directives from government and distributing £26 million in grants
1 minute remaining
to keep businesses afloat. We've communicated regularly with our residents, and now nearly 6,000 people are subscribing to our e-bulletin. The real work of this committee will be focused on recovery. We need to learn from this period and adopt those practices that have worked very well in lockdown. Most of all, we need to hold on to that spirit of mutual support that has characterised Kingston Stronger Together. I'm in no doubt about the enormity of the task ahead as we face the biggest recession in living memory, the latest aspect of a global problem from which our little corner of the world cannot escape. There is a great deal of work to be done at a time when our own finances will be strained as never before. But I was at a meeting tonight where people talked about the need for realism and optimism. Realism about the challenges ahead and optimism about our ability to face them. And that's what I think we will be doing in this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Before we continue, I would just like to go back a little. I think that Mr. Marston and I may have been on silent during my previous remarks. Firstly, we apologise for Councillor Sumner being listed as an independent member instead of a Green Party member. That was an administrative oversight, and again, we apologise for that. And the other statement I made was to ask if any other members wish to speak. I have a list here of after Councillor Kerr, Councillor Davis, Cobbett, Sweeney, Patchcroft, Sumner, Davey, White and Kirsch. If there are any other members who wish to speak, could you please type your name into the chat function now? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, no member has indicated a wish to speak in addition to those listed.
Thank you. So no member has indicated that they wish to speak. So we will now move to Councillor Davis. Would you like to speak, please, Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to start by thanking Councillor Green actually for her period as leader of the council. Having done the job, it's not an easy job to do at all. On the surface, it looks so simple, but underneath it, ripples and tides always seem to mitigate against you, and you never really are necessarily sure all the time.
Excuse me, Councillor Davis, we can't actually hear you.
Well, the microphone is on, so don't know.
I could hear Councillor Davis fine.
Sorry, I couldn't. Okay, most other councillors do appear to be able to hear him.
Maybe you turned me off, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Maybe you've turned me off.
No, I would never do that.
Anyway, let me start again just by briefly saying joining Councillor Kerr, my thanks with Councillor Green for her period as leader of the council. She is obviously, we're not going to agree on a lot, but I think anybody who's been leader knows how difficult a job it is, and she's done that with some pride, and I think that's very important. And also I welcome Councillor Kerr to the position. I'm sure she'll enjoy her time as leader, although of course I hope it's not that long. If I might just also thank the officers as well for what's happened over the last 2 months. It's been 2 to 3 months really, I suppose. It's been a bit of a new journey for everybody, and everybody has had to learn to do new things and do things in different ways. And in a sense, the officers of this council are as much the council as we are the members are, and it's important that we're seen to be working together as a council. And I think that we can say with great pride that actually we have been working together through this last period. In proposing the amendment, which I will now do, I hope people understand that we've circulated it to try and be as helpful as we possibly can do. But that is something we've done because we think it's important that we don't disrupt this meeting this evening. And we're all having to learn how to work through this particular means. Why I think it's important is because this is a very, very rapidly changing scenario that we are facing. I don't think it's reasonable to say that what we saw 2 months ago is the same as it is today. And as we start to unlock, things are going to change around us, it seems, at somewhat of a more rapid pace than the council itself is seemingly wishing to go. I'm very reluctant as ever to make massive radical changes to the council's agenda for such an extended period of time through to October. And that's part of the reason why we believe a sunset clause should be inserted, just so that we can review where we are at every full council meeting and then take a decision whether we want to continue on that path. And I think it's important that the public understands that we're doing that, and it's not just something we do in a sort of random way. I also think that as we emerge from this, I mean, Kingston has been fortunate in many ways. Every death is a great sadness, but the impact of COVID on our residents has not been as great as other parts of London. And I think we can thank God for that, because it's very important that Kingston recognises that it's not had the same difficulties that other parts of London have had. But as we emerge, I do think it's important that we learn and review what we're doing. I'm not sure that this single decision-making committee is the right approach to review.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I think it will do a good job as decision-making in the way a cross-party cabinet would normally do in any other council. But I do think we ought to be looking at the finances of the council much more closely than just having it into a committee of that nature. And I do believe it's time that we started reassessing our health scrutiny and really getting into the data of what's gone on. Part of the reason for that is a personal fear, insofar as we know that this crisis is not over. We know that there is a possibility that this could return in the autumn. And I think if we don't learn from what's happened in the past 2 months and scrutinise what's been going on in partnership with the health service, we could find ourselves unprepared for what comes at us again later in the year. And that would be a regret. So I hope councillors will support it. I'm not doing this, as I say, to cause political issues or friction over it. I just think it's a more sensible approach and pragmatic approach, one that even at the time of the publication of tonight's agenda probably wasn't even then clear in the changing environment we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Cobbett, would you like to speak? Sorry? But that's the amendment you're seconding. This is just speaking only. Councillor Davis, could you confirm that you wish to move an amendment now, please?
Yes, during the course of that speech, I did indicate that, but you might not have picked that up, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. No, I didn't. Okay, so Councillor Davis, you have moved the amendment. I believe that Councillor Bass wishes to second it. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak now or do you wish to speak later?
I'm happy to speak now.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, I'm just going to set up my timer.
Once Councillor Bass has spoken, we all just need to say we received notification of councillors of Hughes, now
Okay, I've set. Am I good to go? Can I go? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I didn't want to repeat what I knew Kevin would say, so I'm sort of going at it from a slightly different angle. But before I get into that, I just wanted to reiterate that we do recognise that this is an unprecedented health crisis, and we really want to thank the many officers of council who have been working hard to support our communities and adapt to the new ways of working. We know this has been a difficult time for many people and their families, and the work of staff is really appreciated. The Conservative group accept that suspending council meetings for a few weeks was necessary, while remote working arrangements and legislation were put in place to make it possible, and also to allow for the council to tackle the immediate need for an operational response. However, we are really concerned that 9 weeks since the lockdown started, this council has had no public meeting on strategy or scrutiny, no opportunity for councillors or members of the public to question, challenge or scrutinise the Liberal Democrat administration, with most decisions, understandably in the early days though, behind closed doors. A single response and recovery committee for all decisions is not sufficient and seems exceptionally light. And so just to get an idea of what other places are doing, I looked at the advice which the Centre for Public Scrutiny and also what other councils are doing. The Centre of Public Scrutiny gives really clear advice on COVID-19, on the importance of continued, robust, member-led scrutiny in this time of crisis. No scrutiny can mean less accountability or worse, weaker decisions that go unchallenged. Maintaining a form of scrutiny in the current crisis is critical for several reasons. There are lots of decisions that have to be made that are going to really affect our local residents. It's important that the council should try and draw on the perspectives of a broad as possible range of people, that's including all councillors. And also, remember, scrutiny activities do not take senior officers and senior members away from the task at hand. They are the task in hand. Councils are democratic institutions, which is why they are leading the local response. And councillors have a vital role in feeding into that and bolstering the response and also the scrutiny function, which is so important. Also, this crisis will not be ending anytime soon. So we do not think it's acceptable to suspend effective governance and scrutiny until the autumn. And there are lots of examples from neighbouring boroughs. I looked at Sutton, Merton, Wandsworth and Richmond, all have slightly different setups and committees, but all are carrying on health overview or some sort of health scrutiny provision. And Richmond Council appears to be having, thank you, Richmond Council is having pretty much a full range of council committees. And I looked at Croydon as well. Croydon is having a joint health and social care subcommittee and scrutiny, a combined scrutiny committee with one item COVID. And we would like that chance to scrutiny. So many councils are carrying on almost virtually, and I couldn't find any others that were as pared down as Kingston Council is. And given that it's such a gulf between others are doing and what the Liberal Democrats are proposing, we've sort of proposed a pragmatic halfway house, focusing on finance and health. And we really hope, we're not being political, we really hope that the Liberal Democrats will live up to the Democrat part of their name and meet us halfway with reinstating the Health Overview Panel, Health and Wellbeing Board, or a combined committee, and a finance committee, with a review at the July committee and not waiting till October Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Councillor Folder-Hughes, did you wish to speak, please?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I indicated that I didn't wish to speak.
You don't?
No.
Thank you. George, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been in touch with quite a few councillors from various councils and political parties to find out how they've been coping with the coronavirus, all of whom are in areas where they've had many more residents and many more cases of coronavirus than Kingston, thankfully. It's fair to say that they are generally astounded how far behind Kingston Council is with meetings and democracy. They generally have had AGMs with no need for EGMs. I still don't really understand why this is an EGM. They have also continued with meetings as normal, but online, as we are today. Now, we've had a few minor problems here today, but I think that's got a lot to do with sheer numbers. But the more online meetings we have, the better they'll be. They've found out that it's fairly straightforward to have online meetings. and business has been carrying on as normal, or as normal as can be with the obvious extra coronavirus work, which we all admire our officers for. Indeed, the Conservative group has carried on having our own group meetings. In fact, we've had more, we've had them every week, all very straightforward. And I guess that even the Lib Dems have managed to find a suitable way of meeting in order for them to politically stab the previous council leader in the back. So I must say that I think the normal committees could and should carry on as normal. This would enable more councillors and residents to take part in meetings, helping and scrutinising the council. It would also mean that councillors who have built up experience and expertise on certain subjects can help make decisions, rather than sub it out to a super committee, where there'll be less scrutiny and less expertise. All relevant reports will need to be put together anyway. But the Lib Dems don't want to do that, so that's fine. So the Conservative amendment does go some way to meet you in the middle, to make up for some of the inadequacies of the original proposal. I hope that the councillors can support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor George. Councillor Cobbett, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy just to keep my comments for when we return to the main motion. I don't need to speak on the amendment as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cobbett. The other names I have for speaking on the amendment are Councillors Abraham, Holt, Ryder Mills and Shaper. Is that correct, please? Oh, right, and Councillor Fatchkov-Sumner. Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak on the amendment, please, apart from those I've already named? Thank you. Councillor Abraham, please.
Madam Mayor, can Councillor Shaper go first? I think her name was first before mine. Thank you.
Okay, if you wish. Councillor Shaper, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to say a few brief words, but what I'd like to say is obviously I have been liaising with officers, as other councillors have been, I expect, and their advice to me has obviously been very clear about their capacity to deliver full committee-style service over the next few weeks. I have to take that on good faith as HOP chair. What I've done is I have taken on board their comments, and whilst I will not be voting for the amendment as such, I want to have it on record. I want to take this opportunity of saying quite clearly that the suggestion made in the reasons for tabling the amendment, I actually support, and I've already instigated that process. I want to let the council members know that I have been speaking with Iona Liddington, Director of Public Health, and I would like to, my aim is to have a joint session, as I like to call it, whether that's a Q&A session or otherwise, sometime in the summer that would have replaced the HOP committee in July. Now, I don't know more than that at this stage. It's very early days, but I want to make it absolutely crystal clear that I place a great deal of importance on member engagement. And whilst, as I say, whilst I will be not voting for the amendment, I will be 100% supporting the idea of an informal style session. It really is a work in progress because we're not quite sure yet how that will pan out, but my ideas are that it will involve both committees and it will take place sometime in July. As soon as I have any more details about the organisation of that, I will of course be in touch with members, and I'm very happy to liaise outside this committee meeting on that topic. And I think I just want to emphasise that, you know, I, as HOP chair, I take scrutiny extremely seriously, and in doing so, I want to give members the opportunity of engaging. I think that's very important, and that's really what I wanted to say. That is where my emphasis will be over the next few weeks, and as I say, I will be working very hard to try and get this session up and running, and it will be really on the COVID response, and I think that's very important that members have an opportunity of asking questions at that stage. If the situation changes, I've been advised by officers, if the situation changes, they will let me know as soon as possible. And of course, I'm sure other members will be advised as well. But as far as my role is concerned, I'll be making sure that all members as possible will be as engaged as fully as possible.
1 minute
Thank you,
remaining.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Schaefer. Councillor Holt, please. Councillor Holt?
I didn't know I was on the list too.
Okay,
I hadn't put
you.
my name forward, so I
you.
thought you were saying somebody else's name.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Holt. Councillor Abraham, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to support what Councillor Sharper has said, because I am aware that she has been working behind the scenes and trying to get meetings and trying to deal, because we take scrutiny very, very seriously. And I've been on the HOP committee for a very long time. And like her, I do take scrutiny very seriously. And it's important to know that she has been trying to engage and do things, but unfortunately she has to go by what officers have been advising her to do. And I know she is working very hard towards this. I would like to support the amendment on this part alone, but I will be voting against the other rest of the amendment. I just wanted to make it clear that Councillor Sharper is doing a fantastic job, trying to do her level best as chair of HOP and working very, very closely with all the organisations. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Abraham. Councillor Fodgkov-Sumner, please. Councillor Fodgkov-Sumner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I would like to speak in favour of the amendment. I am surprised that a Liberal Democrat administration is not trying to have a more democratic answer to local government, and I'm somewhat surprised that it's the Conservatives who are proposing to have a much more democratic and open system during the COVID crisis than the Liberal Democrats. I feel that's quite shocking. I would also, in particular, I would like to raise a point about health scrutiny. We, as a local authority, have a legal obligation to provide health scrutiny. And I would echo and stress that this is even more important, not less, at a time when we're dealing with a national health emergency. I am somewhat dismayed by Councillor Sharper's comments that she has to take the advice of officers that they do not have the capacity to do health scrutiny. I'm sorry, health scrutiny is a matter of local government governance. It is not to do with the capacity. I understand that officers are working hard, but we have a moral duty and a legal duty to ensure that health scrutiny happens, particularly at this time, which is why I would like to go one step further, and I will be calling under the provisions of the Local Government Act of 2000 under section 9FC, subsection F1, paragraph 1, section C. I am calling for an emergency meeting of health scrutiny to deal with the matter of the COVID response, and in particular the PPE crisis. And so I would like to call for that now under local government law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fodgkov-Sumner. Councillor Ryder-Mills, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I very much respect the wish of the author of this amendment not to criticise the administration. However, Councillor Davis speaks of paralysing democracy for 5 months. In truth, and factoring in the summer recess, this is barely more than one normal committee cycle, and will be reviewed at every meeting of the new committee, as the leader has said. To believe that much meaningful progress towards even a new normality will be achieved before mid-July, let alone looking forward to being in a position of looking at the recovery phase by then, I find regrettably over-optimistic. As an example, I spent this afternoon in a school governors meeting where it was blindingly clear that whilst we are doing all we can to open the school back up as much as possible during the rest of this term, we will only be able, under the current restrictions, to be able to provide a skeleton in school education part-time for fewer than half the pupils. We need to be just as realistic with council affairs and realise that this is a long haul back, respect the colossal workload on officers and put these emergency procedures in place until, regrettably, the other side of summer, unless it's reviewed positively before then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryder Mills. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this amendment, please? If so, could you type your name into the chat function now, and we will allow 10 seconds for you to do so if you wish to. Councillor. Sorry, we're not on mute. As no other member has indicated, Councillor Davey, would you like to sum up, please? Anita Shaver wants to speak again.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Did you ask me to sum up again? I thought I saw
Mayor,
somebody else wanted
I
to
think
speak.
there are. Yeah.
Please could members type into the chat function. It's very difficult to hear who's speaking and what they're saying. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I was hoping to respond to Councillor Falkshoff-Sumner's comments.
I'm sorry, Councillor Schaefer, there is no provision for you to speak again. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Davis, would you like to sum up the original motion? Sum up your amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I am clearly disappointed that it doesn't sound as if the Liberal Democrat administration wants to vote for this motion. To just respond to some of the comments, of course I understand that the capacity for committees is limited in the current circumstances. Of course I understand that, and that's why I'm not asking that we restore everything. I mean, I would, however, note that in doing this, we are taking every possibility we can to restore some committees that play a lesser function, in my view, such as ensuring that neighbourhood planning subcommittees continue to meet. All the while, the strategic work that we need to carry out seems to be being neglected. So I am disappointed that that's the case. To Councillor Ryder Mills, I would say actually it's two committee cycles, because obviously this motion that's been put is that we would continue in this vein until October committee meeting. So that is some considerable time. And actually, I would say to him that in my view, given the fact we have already missed one committee cycle, and there clearly must be decisions that are pending that should be happening of all sorts and shapes and sizes, then maybe we should actually be meeting through the summer anyway. That is the intention of the original motion, which I've amended, because in that paper it clearly states that this new emergency committee will meet during the summer. And I think probably as councillors we owe a duty to our residents in this particular crisis to be committing our time over the summer to doing that. I have to say also that when you do look around, as Councillor Bass has already identified from her survey, brief survey of councils, we are doing considerably less in terms of opening up our council and being transparent around this crisis than any other council I've come across. It's been 2 months since the government actually passed the act that allowed us to move to this type of meeting. This is the first time, the first opportunity we've really had to have a proper meeting over that period, where many other councillors are considerably further ahead of us. What I would accept if this is defeated is I do hope that the leader will give a very, very firm undertaking. I think I heard something of that, but a very, very firm undertaking that there will be an item on the July meeting agenda which reviews these emergency arrangements, so that we don't get in a situation where we just accept this is the norm, that we are very clearly at every meeting that possible the council holds, actually looking again at our arrangements and seeing whether they are still appropriate in the circumstances that pertain at that time. Because at that time, in my view, is almost certainly going to be different to the time we're in now.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Kerr, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to thank Councillor Davis for the amendment and repeat Madam Mayor's thanks for the courtesy of giving us advance notice. I know that it has helped Democratic Service colleagues considerably. I appreciate the thought that's gone into this, and I recognise that it is motivated by a desire to good governance. However, I don't agree that we need to change course. A lot of thinking has gone into the structure that we have come up with. Other councils are also operating on this model. It allows democratically elected members to make decisions in public, and that is what matters. The committee will have sight of the metrics around the COVID-19 crisis and will be able to scrutinise the council's response. That's why opposition members are invited to be part of this system. This is the critical difference between a cabinet model and a committee model. The scrutiny happens by you as our critical friends at the point of decision making. I agree that health scrutiny is very important, and I'm very grateful to my colleague, Councillor Anita Shaper, for running an informal joint meeting of the Health Overview Panel and the Health and Wellbeing Board. She's ensuring that that oversight continues throughout the crisis. But she also understands that officer time is simply not available at the moment to facilitate more formal committee meetings, but her flexibility is to be applauded. Financial scrutiny, you're quite right. Councillor Davis is also critical at this time. Our Response and Recovery Committee will allow flexibility of membership to ensure that those with the greatest expertise can be subbed onto the committee. All members will be included.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you have to remember the pressures on officers' time at this moment. Adding numerous new committees to the calendar is not helpful to them. It may be that because I see so much more of their work in my current role that I understand how hard they're working. And I think that it's right. We balance our usual way of doing things with the need to support our communities at a time of acute need. You mentioned planning and you wonder why that is going ahead, but I might point out that that is a directive from government to get on with planning and has been from early on in this crisis, and we are responding to that. I want to assure you that we do want to get this right. We recognise that this is a compromise system and we will review how it's going on. However, I do not agree that we should formally review the structure at the next full council meeting, which is only 7 weeks away. We will only have had 2 Response and Recovery Committee meetings by that time, and I think it's simply too early to decide whether or not this system is working effectively. We recognise that it isn't necessarily perfect, and it may have some teething problems, but what it does do is it guarantees democratic control of decisions, and it ensures that any resident who wants to follow our decision making will be able to do that live, just as they can tonight.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I simply want to explain that we can't support your amendment, but we thank you for the thought that went into it.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. We will now move to a vote on the amendment. Now, the amendment is in 4 parts. Do members wish to vote on it as, I will assume that we are voting on the amendment as a whole. If any member wishes to divide it into 4 parts, please would you indicate by typing your name in the chat function. I do wish to make it clear that this is a roll call vote. This means that every member's name will be called out and you will have to respond one after the other, which will be obviously fairly time consuming. And if members wish to have a vote on each constituent part of the amendment, then we will have to do that 4 times, which of course, if that's what members wish, we will do. So if any member wishes to vote on each constituent part separately, would you type your name into the chat box now, please?
Madam Mayor, no member has indicated a wish for a separate vote.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard that. Mr. Marston has just stated that no member has indicated a wish for a separate vote. Can we now move to the vote, please? Mr. Marston will call, we are voting on the amendment. Mr. Marston will call out each member's name alphabetically, and will you please answer for or against? And will you unmute and then mute again as quickly as possible in order to ensure that the process runs as smoothly as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will now call out members in alphabetical order. Councillor Abbas.
Against.
Councillor Abraham.
Against.
Councillor Archer.
Against.
Councillor Aurora.
For.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Bass.
For it.
Councillor Bayman.
Against.
Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Against.
Councillor Olivia Bolt.
Against.
Councillor Cobbett.
Against.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Davey. Councillor Davey.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dunstone. Councillor Dunstone.
Against.
Councillor Durant.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Folder Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Fran.
For.
Councillor Gander. Councillor Gander. Councillor Gander.
Against.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Goodship.
Against.
Councillor Green.
Against.
Councillor Hart.
Against.
Councillor Heath. Councillor Heath. Councillor Heath, would you like to indicate your vote, please? Councillor Heath, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, against.
Councillor Holt.
Against.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Kirsch.
Against.
Councillor Lidbetter. Councillor Lidbetter.
Against.
Sorry, Councillor Lidbetter. Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
I'm voting against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Mole.
Against.
Councillor Netley.
For.
Councillor Rivalia.
Against.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
Against.
Councillor Shaper.
Against.
Councillor Self.
Against.
Councillor Shepherd.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
Against.
Councillor Fauchikoff Sumner.
For.
Councillor Sweeney.
Against.
Councillor Tayala. Councillor Tayala. Councillor Tayala, would you like to indicate your vote, please?
Who?
Councillor Tayala, can you hear me? We'll return to Councillor Tayala's vote in a moment. Councillor Thompson?
Against.
Councillor Tayala, thank you. Can you repeat your vote, please?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Tolley.
Against.
Councillor Waring.
Against.
Councillor White.
Against.
Councillor Wookey.
Against.
Councillor Yoganathan.
Against.
And Councillor Young.
Against.
Madam Mayor, I can confirm that there were 10 votes in favour of the amendment and 37 against.
Thank you, Mr. Marston. If there were 10 votes for and 37 against, the amendment is not carried. Thank you. We will now return to the debate on the original motion. So, Councillor Cobbett, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and let me start by thanking you for your efforts and also the efforts of colleagues in IT and Democratic Services in setting us up today for our first ever virtual meeting. I think one of the things that many of us will have noticed in this COVID crisis is that attention has been focused on jobs that people might describe as back office or behind the scenes that maybe normally are not always noticed or given credit. And it's quite right that we do acknowledge the role that people play, including as council workers and public servants. And I hope that that's one of the things that starts to change even after this crisis concludes. May I also associate myself with Councillor Kerr's comments in thanking Councillor Green for her service both to our group and our party and her public service as leader of the council over the last 7 years, and welcome Councillor Kerr to her place as new leader, although I can't quite agree with Councillor Davis's comments that he hopes the tenure is short. Someone who is has such an amazing outdoor space and as he has showcased at the meeting tonight is surely having far too much fun to want to return to leading the council anytime too soon. And may I also associate myself with your earlier comments in your mayor's remarks. What could be a better way to mark the 30th anniversary of Councillor Cunningham as a member on the council than by having a series of roll call votes? He must be beside himself. We've heard already quite a lot about the response and the frontline response, and I've been really proud of what we've been able to do in the area that I look after in the portfolio, whether it's IT enabling people to work from home, whether it's customer service taking the calls on our line with people requesting help or offering help around this crisis, or whether it's the work of our comms team where they're putting newsletters out 3 times every week so that people know how they can get help, how we're responding, and also profiling some of the community volunteering that's going on. Whether it's the way that adult education have put courses online in a way, in a matter of weeks that would often take months to do, making sure that people on credit-bearing courses can complete their learning for this year, or whether it's the work of the museum in celebrating VE Day through Dance for VE Day, or putting the Year of Mybridge online, or and perhaps most especially our library service, who have had so far 83,000 views in their efforts through book reviews and rhyme times to kind of stimulate, inform and educate the public while we're all stuck at home. The reason I mention these things in this context is because it's really important that this work continues, and it's really important that where the focus is. Clearly, this is going to be something of a balance. Wherever we set it up in terms of interim meeting arrangements, you could argue that we were putting too much resource in meetings versus the front line, or you could argue vice versa. We've tried to strike that balance, and the reason we do so, I think, primarily is because
1 minute remaining.
Thank you, because we're representatives of the public, and sometimes as councillors we get it wrong, and the public are quick to tell us that we've got it wrong. That's not what I'm picking up on this. There are lots of things around COVID-19 and around the council's response that residents are asking and are obviously worried about and wanting information about. Seeing the council run its full committee cycle at a time when no one else is doing business as usual and is having to respond and be agile in the face of the crisis, but actually look odd to many people who want to be focusing on the things that matter to them and not our internal processes. You know, so I just think in that light, we should focus our resources on the people and the areas that need it most, while still making decisions in public as and democratically as we must do. And therefore, I support the proposal in front of us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Cobbett. I have here a list of other members who wish to speak. Councillor Sweeney, Councillor Falchcroft-Sumner, Councillor Davey, White and Kirsch, who has reserved his right to speak as seconder. If any other member would like to speak, we can have two more. Please type your name to the chat function now. Councillor Sweeney, please.
Okay. Good evening, councillors. Yeah, I think I'd be helpful to think about what councillors should be doing during this crisis. The council is a category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, and you know, there's legislation that's set out. We're in an emergency, and COVID outbreak needs to be dealt with, and the council is working with local partners and organisations to manage and coordinate responses across the borough. So given the nature of the focus of the emergency, there's a greater focus on supporting the most vulnerable members of our communities and working with health partners. And I think it's reason why I support this proposal is that the council's role within this context is not to expect business as usual and attend committee meetings and add more burden to a very thinly stretched council organisation, which it frankly cannot handle that workload at the moment. Our role is to provide vital local leadership. And this has been underlined if you read the guidance from London councils to councillors and to the Local Government Association. So rather than become a bottleneck to an outstanding operational response, which is led by officers and requires their expertise in health and healthcare, I think the councillors, like the local authority, need to adapt to the conditions. And at least among the Live Dem group, which I have direct experience of, we have understood that need to focus on our wards and help build a bridge between the councillors, between the council and the communities, and to provide and support both those who need our help and work with local voluntary groups. Examples of that are, you know, 1,000 calls over to vulnerable members of the community in the borough from Liberal Democrat councillors. Down in south of the borough in Berrylands, Tolworth and Chessington, councillors Diane Nathan and Dunstan, myself, we've been very involved in setting up a network of food champions. It's been very successful. There's over 60 south of the borough. We have over now 100 across the borough. So every day vital supplies are going to Kingston Food Bank because of the work that councillors are doing and the coordination. So I'm very proud of those things, but those are the things that we need to do. We need to keep carrying on sharing communications and informing residents about the services and the operations of the council. So, for example, just to draw attention, Kingston Music Service has done an outstanding job of transferring its lessons online, and the budding guitarist in our family is one of the recipients of that.
1 minute remaining.
But I can only just applaud those sorts of efforts. As we are now coming out of COVID, I don't think these sorts of things have to stop. We are beginning to start to think about the economic impact within our communities. And I know, again, councillors in Surbiton have been talking with various members of the community online in a movement called Surbiton Together, about how we reinvigorate the high street. Talking about, for example, how does the Surbiton Farmers Market going to function in these new conditions? We've also organised a Kingston Business Summit. We had over 151 business organisations and members of the business communities sign up to that and talk about what the future might look like under COVID. So while I appreciate the opposition's desire to spend lots of time committees, I think the measures that we have imposed are going to work. And I think now is a great time to go back to your wards and help out there, because I think that's what is required of us in the moment during this crisis. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. I would just like to go back to Councillor Cobbett's comments, please. Councillor Cobbett, you commented that you thanked Heritage. The next speaker I have here is Councillor Fochkov-Sumner.
Madam Mayor, I'd also like to raise a point of order separately, please. May I do that before I speak on the substantive motion?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I'd like to raise a point of order. Councillor Sweeney, in his response, mentioned the Kingston Business Forum that has been holding meetings of 100 people. I do believe that Councillor Sweeney is actually associated as is a member of the board on that, along with his close friend Andrew Waldridge. And I was wondering whether he was going to be declaring a personal interest, please.
Madam Mayor, the declaration of interest is a matter for the individual member concerned.
Thank you. Did you hear that, Councillor?
Well, let's hope that Councillor Sweeney does the decent thing, shall we? So to my main point on the main substantive motion, if these measures had been put in place from the 4th of April at the beginning, when the law changed, so the law change came into practice on the 4th of April, then I would have been supportive. If a similar measure had been brought into place at the outset of the outbreak and the council used procedural order number 31, where it allowed councillors to make decisions during an emergency, rather than passing it to council officers, I would have been supportive. However, we are looking at a situation now where we are several weeks down the line, we are falling behind the majority of councillors. We are dragging our heels whilst other councils are moving towards democratic and open decision making. We are putting in place a measure which should have been put in place 6 weeks ago. It is not good enough. I too would like to applaud the work of people in the community. I'd particularly like to applaud people, for example, like the Don Locals Action Group, who have delivered and raised food parcels for 1,500 people per week. Now, that is the kind of community activism that we should all be supporting and all be lauding. And I personally would like to give thanks to them, and also our great workers in the NHS. But what we're dealing with now, we're dealing with democracy. At a time where we've got our council planning department being quoted in Property Wire and been talking about what a great job they did in March, setting up virtual meetings with property developers, we still only, as councillors, for the democracy of our borough, only had virtual meetings in May. So why did property developers get virtual meetings with council officers before we, as councillors and our residents, were able to? In addition, I would also like to raise a point. We're having a debate and a vote tonight about whether this measure goes through, and yet all of the council meetings and all of the invitations are already set up. So it's almost like a fait accompli. So either we are an organisation that we are a voting system here, or it's not. It's almost like predetermination. So the council's already decided what we're doing. It just doesn't seem right to me. There is just so much here. We are far behind everybody else, and nobody seems to be mentioning that apart from Councillor Davies and Councillor Bath. Every other authority I know is moving towards bringing back strategic committees, and you're talking about taking them away. Now, I agree that council officers need to concentrate on things that are important, but it's no extra work to put the same agenda points into a strategic committee than it is to put it into one committee. My final point, Madam Mayor, is, and I actually welcomed Councillor Kerr's comments, in her speech earlier, she said that all councillors would be able to participate in the Emergency Response Committee. Well, I'm sorry, I've been told I'm not. I'm told that I'm the only councillor on this council that will not be allowed to take part in this committee. And so either Councillor Kerr was, again, telling a Jackanory story in her speech, or she simply wasn't aware of the facts and hasn't kept up with the facts, which, bearing in mind she's supposed to be the leader of the council now, is slightly concerning. You think that should do a background reading and actually, be aware of the situation regarding governance and democracy in the borough that he's supposed to be leading. So I find it all slightly concerning. So I will actually be abstaining from this motion because I feel that it doesn't go far enough. I feel it is yet another attempt by this administration
Time's up, Councillor.
to cover up the fact that they've run out of ideas and they don't know what to do. So
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. You have out of time. Our next speaker is Councillor Davey. Would you like to speak, please, Councillor Davey? Councillor Davey, can you hear?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the incredible work of the Housing Department. They have been amazing. Just to get the rough sleepers off the streets, it took all three layers of local government. It took GLA, it took the local MP, it took officers working over weekends to get everybody inside. And now I'd like to thank the volunteers and also the charities, KCAH and Sphere, for doing a fantastic job managing the hotels where we have the rough sleepers. And the volunteers who are making sure they get the food and the care they need, but also the people in our own stock who are looking after the people in temporary accommodation, the officers are calling them, checking them regularly, are they all right? Those vulnerable people in our own stock, the officers are making thousands of calls each week, checking on people, seeing they're all right. The whole community is pulling together. This is a marathon. If anyone thinks that stay alert means it's over, they've got it wrong. In fact, I've been going to the food banks. I've been seeing that actually the demands in the food banks have been rising. We are just seeing the beginning of the economic impact of COVID, and it looks bad. It looks very serious indeed. So what we're talking about is we've got to focus on the main prize. Focus on the main prize, and that is defeating COVID and defeating the effects on the economy. I'm very disappointed by this attitude that it's all over now. We can all just be self-indulgent. No, we've got to focus on the main prize, and the main prize is defeating COVID and defeating its economic effects on our community. Our community is out there fighting. We should be out there fighting with them. And please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to share the perspective of our children's services during the pandemic, where the key focus is safeguarding children and young people and saving them from harm and risk of harm, and promoting the well-being of those who are vulnerable. I'm very proud of achieving for children, schools, early years providers and partners who have continued to provide critical frontline services. Our schools have been exceptional, with amazing support from Achieving for Children. They have mostly remained open, offering care and education to critical worker children, those with education, health and care plans, and those who are most vulnerable. Analysis this week has shown that Kingston and Richmond are the London boroughs with the highest numbers of vulnerable children attending school, and we have been asked to provide case studies as an exemplar of good practice. This has been achieved because of the excellent relationship we have with our schools, where even the academies feel part of the Kingston school family. AFC and the schools are working so hard together towards a gradual reopening from June the 1st, when schools feel comfortable to do so. There is an inbuilt resilience and support network where they help each other. This was particularly apparent during the Easter holidays, where there was collaboration to ensure that all those who needed a place in school were able to access it. A special mention to our early years providers, where a small number remained open with a welcoming and flexible approach, providing care to our youngest children even when they're not part of their nursery. Our services, such as children's centres and youth services, have been very creative in adapting to the current norm. I recommend you all to have a look online at the youth service, virtual running club, and the children's centre's Diddy Dance. You will definitely have fun. There has been meaningful collaboration with partners, for example, where our youth workers have accompanied the police to outdoor settings to work with congregations of young people. This has been a very effective approach. AFC has also played its part in Kingston Stronger Together, delivering food parcels and medication to vulnerable families. In social care, we are confident that our children and young people are safe. Our usual child-centred approach has continued, whilst introducing digital technologies to maintain contact. Some face-to-face contact continues with care, and child protection conferences and child in need have been served so well during this period when decisions had to be made under emergency arrangements. This new committee going forward will provide democratic accountability, and I look forward to that, whilst being truly grateful to Ian Dodds, Charis Penfold, Alison Twynham, everyone at AFC.
1 minute remaining.
All our schools and nurseries. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you, Councillor White. Mr. Mosson, have any other members indicated they wish to speak? Yeah. In which case, Councillor Kirsch is second of the motion. Would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The COVID-19 pandemic has required the Council to rapidly refocus its resources to prioritise support to local health and care services, vulnerable residents and local businesses. The pandemic has also affected our decision-making process and presents us with challenges, as social distancing rules and the requirement to stay at home have at first made the transaction of business through committee meetings impossible. Initially, all non-urgent business had been postponed, and the emergency mechanisms in our constitution have been utilised to enable the chief executive and executive directors to take urgent decisions. Elected members have still been consulted during this time, but we think now is the right time to reintroduce collective decision-making by members again, in the interest of transparency, democratic oversight, and accountability. Fortunately, the government has recently provided the legal framework to operate virtual meetings lawfully. Hence, we can now make use of these new regulations. However, in the context of the pandemic and the impact of RBK staff, we have to keep in mind that it's still imperative that officers are not diverted from the delivery of critical frontline services and the priority of saving lives. Therefore, the temporary streamlining of the decision-making makes sense under these circumstances, and we propose the temporary establishment of a response and recovery committee, which will meet monthly to exercise all the functions of the 5 strategic committees. At full council in October, we will revisit the provision, as the idea is to commence decision-making in the usual way as soon as it's safe for everybody involved, practicable, and feasible to do so. I am very grateful to officers from Democratic Services who have worked hard in making our virtual meetings happen, and who support members and chairs and the public in our virtual meetings journey. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank all those councillors from all benches who have given up their time to help establish RBK's virtual meetings whilst taking part in various test meetings. And of course, thanks again to officers for facilitating these meetings in the first place. I would also like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude and heartfelt thanks to all the RBK officers and all those who work as partners and or contractors with RBK for their amazing work they are doing during this pandemic to help to manage the impact of COVID-19 and to help our residents and the most vulnerable in our communities. Thank you so much. I know that many have been redeployed to help with different tasks. They had to step up in new roles, and I think they have done so brilliantly. Moving forward, this will be a journey for all of us, members, officers, and the general public. With the new arrangements, and with the virtual meetings, with the virtual held meetings to come, there will be glitches, as we have seen a couple today, and we will have to make adjustments, and we will have to adapt. But together, we can make this work. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kirsch. Councillor Kerr, would you like to sum up as the original mover of the motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to enhance, to stress some of the things that my colleagues have said. It is true that this crisis has galvanised the council and that in many ways it has proved a catalyst for more flexible, more agile working. It has, for instance, initiated remote working by the entire council staff, which has been managed so efficiently and so flexibly by all. We see staff members doing unusual jobs. If you phone our Kingston Stronger Together hub, you may find that a librarian answers the phone and deals with your inquiry. Our rangers delivering food parcels, our planning enforcement officers are organising food collection points on streets that Councillor Sweeney referred to. Our online services have been phenomenally successful. Councillor Cobbett mentioned the Kingston Music Scene working online. Today, I heard that Sally Benatar, our borough commander, is one of its pupils during this crisis. There is a great deal that we should be proud of, but obviously there is a great deal more to do, and I commend this motion as a means to give democratic oversight and transparency to the public as we make decisions in the difficult days ahead as we face the hope of recovery.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. So we now turn to the recommendations on page A1 of the report after that debate. If there are any councillors who wish to go to a vote on this item, which again will be a roll call vote, would you please type your name into the chat function now? I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, we have requests from members for a roll call vote.
Thank you. We have requests for a roll call vote, so we will follow the same procedure as previously. So, Mr. Marston, would you like to commence, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I will call out the names of every member in alphabetical order. Please indicate whether you vote for, against, or abstain. Councillor Abbas.
For.
Councillor Abraham.
For.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Aurora.
Abstain.
Councillor Bailey.
For.
Councillor Bass.
Abstain.
Councillor Bayman.
For.
Councillor Fiona Holt.
For.
Councillor Olivia Holt.
For.
Councillor Cobbett.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Davis.
Abstain.
Councillor Dunstan.
For.
Councillor Durand.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Colby Hughes.
For.
Councillor Cram.
Abstain.
Councillor Gander.
For.
Councillor George.
Abstain.
Councillor Goodwin.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Farr. Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Hughes. Councillor Hughes.
Abstain.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Kirsch.
For.
Councillor Lidbesser.
4.
Councillor Moore.
4.
Councillor Davey.
Abstain.
Councillor Ravalia.
4.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
4.
Councillor Shaper.
4.
Councillor Self.
4.
Councillor Shepherd.
Abstain.
Councillor Stewart.
4.
Councillor Fauchkoff-Sumner.
Abstain.
Councillor Sweeney.
4.
Councillor Tyler.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Tolley.
4.
Councillor Waring.
4.
Councillor White.
4.
Councillor Wookey.
4.
Councillor Yoganathan.
4.
And Councillor Young.
4.
Thank you, members. Madam Mayor, we have 37 members in favour of the motion, none against and 10 abstentions.
Thank you. The motion is therefore carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, item 6, the mayoral arrangements for the municipal year 2020 to 2021. This item is for noting, and I have not received any advance requests from councillors to speak on it. If there are any members who wish to speak, could you please indicate by typing your name into the chat function now, and as before, I will allow 10 seconds for that procedure to begin.
Madam Mayor, no councillor has indicated a wish to speak on this item.
Thank you. No councillor has indicated a wish to speak. So that item is now noted. So thank you. Appointment of Deputy Mayor and Deputy Mayor's Escort. That is item 7 on the agenda, the appointment of the Deputy Mayor and Escort. If there are any members who wish to speak on this, please could you indicate by typing your name into the chat function now. Councillor Fauchkoff-Sumner, you have indicated you wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to welcome Councillor Abrahams in her role as Deputy Mayor. I would like to congratulate her. I think she'll make an excellent Deputy Mayor. She's always been an outstanding councillor, and I thought she was particularly good when she was Chair of Neighbourhood, and so I'd just like to congratulate her. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Davis, did you wish to speak on this? Your name's appeared, but I'm not sure if it's relevant to this. No.
You mean my name? Okay.
I'm sorry?
I haven't touched my keyboard.
Oh dear.
That may have been on the previous.
It's okay. It's just appeared on my chat function, but it's actually in relation to the roll call like 5 minutes ago. I should really be leaving Mr. Marston to deal with this and not doing it myself. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you very much indeed to Council, firstly for allowing me to continue as Mayor for a second year. I understand that the last person to do this was Mayor Shrubsole in about 1882, but he died in office. No, anyway, the last person to do this died in office, so I'm hoping that's not set a precedent. I would like to welcome Councillor Abraham as Deputy Mayor with her husband Matthew. As Councillor Sumner says, they will be an excellent deputy and escort. And I would also like to thank Councillor Ravalia for his help, support and work during my previous mayoral year. Thank you very much indeed. Item 9, item 9. Appointment, item 8, appointments of members to committees, panels and other bodies. We now turn to item 8 on the agenda. Details of the appointments are set out in Appendix B of the agenda pack. Councillor Kerr, will you confirm if you will be moving the recommendation in item 8 and on page B1 of your report, please?
I will.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Self, will you be the seconder for these recommendations, please?
Actually, I'll second that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak later if necessary?
If necessary, but thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Beside these two councillors, I have received requests in advance from councillors Fodgkov, Sumner and Ryder Mills to speak on this item. If there are any others who wish to speak on this, please could you indicate by typing your name into the chat function now.
Madam Mayor, no other members have indicated they wish to speak on this item.
Thank you. Councillor Fodgkov, Sumner, would you like to speak, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and I would just like to thank Councillor Kerr for her comments earlier to say that all councillors would now be included in the committee, in the response to the emergency committee, because obviously anyone that had read the agenda would have seen that I had been excluded. And so I'd like to thank Councillor Kerr for confirming that all councillors will be included. So will this be going through as a formal amendment, or will that just be confirmed in writing by Councillor Kerr? I was originally going to speak to say that I did feel that one of the good points I thought about the motion that had been put forward was how officers had indicated how important it was for all backbenchers to participate in the emergency response committee, and they thought that that committee was the best vehicle to allow that to happen. However, I had noticed that I was excluded from that, so perhaps it wasn't all backbenchers. But now, as Councillor Kerr has confirmed live on air that all councillors will now be able to take part, I would just ask for in writing for that to be confirmed how that will be happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have just taken some advice from Mr. Marston, who will now respond to your points.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the avoidance of doubt, all members will have access to the Response and Recovery Committee through the normal means in procedure rules. So there are procedure rules which allow every member to request to speak at committee, and that will apply to the Response and Recovery Committee too.
Thank you, Mr. Marston. Councillor Ryder Mills, do you wish to speak?
I think that what I was going to say is now irrelevant, so I'll turn down your kind offer, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Ryder Mills. Councillor Kerr, would you like to sum up the motion, please?
Well, I think this is really a procedural motion that doesn't need a long speech. I'd just like to clarify that, and I was sorry if I have misled anyone. When I said all councillors, I meant that all Liberal Democrat councillors would be eligible to represent our side at the new committee. I did not mean that I had any jurisdiction over the opposition, either the Conservatives or otherwise. So I'm sorry if that was unclear, but I hope that it is now sorted out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. So we now turn to the recommendations set out on page B1 of this report. Councillor Self, did you wish to speak as you reserved your right to speak?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I won't prolong the meeting. I trust everybody will vote for it. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Self. So we now turn to recommendations set out on page B1 of the report. If there is any councillor who wishes to go to a vote on this item, which again, of course, will be a roll call vote, could you please type your name into the chat function now? Otherwise, I will take it that the recommendations are agreed unanimously. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we have a request for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Councillor Sumner has requested a roll call vote. We will now go to a roll call vote as stated. So we are voting on the appointments of members to committees, panels and other bodies. At Appendix B in your agenda papers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once more, I will call out the names of members alphabetically. Councillor Abbas.
4.
Councillor Abraham.
4.
Councillor Archer.
4.
Councillor Aurora.
4.
Councillor Bailey.
4.
Councillor Bass.
4.
Councillor Bainham.
4.
Councillor Fiona Bolt.
4.
Councillor Olivia Bolt.
4.
Councillor Cobbett.
4.
Councillor Cunningham. Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham, how would you like to wish to vote?
4.
Councillor Davey.
Sorry, 4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Dunstan.
4.
Councillor Durant.
4.
Councillor Edwards.
4.
Councillor Colby Hughes.
4.
Councillor Fran.
4.
Councillor Gander. Councillor George. Councillor Butcher.
4.
Councillor Green. Councillor Parr. Councillor Heath. Councillor Holt.
4.
Councillor Hughes.
4.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kirsch.
4.
Councillor Lidbetter.
Sorry, Gary, I've lost connection. I'm afraid I can't hear the meeting.
I'm sorry, which member has lost connection?
I can't hear you very well. I can phone in, but I can't hear you very well. I've lost the connection. My computer has frozen.
Okay, is that Councillor Heath? I'm sorry. Councillor Lidbetter, can you hear me and vote?
I can't really make out what you're saying, I'm afraid.
Councillor Lidbetter, how would you like to vote? We'll return to Councillor Lidbetter in a moment. Councillor Moll.
4.
Councillor Nedley.
4.
Councillor Ravaya.
I'm trying to hear on the phone. I can't.
4.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
4.
Councillor Schaefer.
4.
Councillor Self.
4.
Councillor Shepherd.
4.
Councillor Stewart.
4.
Councillor Felshcott-Sumner.
Against.
Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Sweeney.
4. 4.
Councillor Taylor.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Tolley.
4.
Councillor Waring.
4.
Councillor White.
4.
Councillor Wookie.
4.
Councillor Yoganathan.
4.
Councillor Young.
4.
Okay, can we return please to Councillor Lidbetter? Councillor Lidbetter, can you hear me now? Councillor Lidbetter? Madam Mayor, we seem to be unable to obtain the votes of Councillor Lidbetter. The votes of the members that we have is 45 in favour of the motion, 1 against, and no abstentions.
Thank you. 45 in favour of the motion, 1 against, no abstentions, and unable to receive the vote of Councillor Lidbetter, but nonetheless the vote is 45 to 1. So that motion is now carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is number 10, item number 10, nomination of members to London Council's committees and other London bodies for the 2021 municipal year. Councillor Kirsch, will you please move these recommendations in item 10?
I will move this item. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Self, will you second these recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll second them. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We have not received any advance requests from councillors to speak on this item. So if anybody does wish to speak, once again, could you indicate by typing your name into the chat function now?
Madam Mayor, there are no members who wish to speak on this item.
Thank you. No members wish to speak. So I now turn to the recommendations set out on page C1 of the agenda report. So if nobody wishes to go to a vote on this, I will take it that the recommendations are agreed unanimously. Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. Thank you. That is a unanimous vote. We are now to items 11 and 12, urgent items authorised by the Mayor. Very sorry. The London bodies for the 2020 to 2021 municipal year in Appendix C, and this is the last item on the agenda. Councillor Kirsch, will you move the recommendations, please?
I'm happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Self, would you second the recommendations?
Yeah. Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll second that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on that, please? Thank you. Nobody has indicated that they wish to speak. So can we regard that as a unanimous vote? If anybody wishes to go to a vote, please will you type your name into the chat function now. Yes.
Madam Mayor, no members have indicated they wish to speak or wish to go to a vote.
No, as nobody wishes to speak or go to a vote, I will take it that the recommendations are agreed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to item 11 and 12.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I've raised it in chat, but everyone's ignored me. I couldn't hear you at all. You went blank.
I'm sorry. Which part? How long have you? Well, how long have you been missing out, Councillor Sumner?
Sorry, I heard you move the end of the last vote, which I believe is item 9, and then you said something